Jai Hind and a very good evening to one and all. We, cadets of Changukana Thakur, Arts, Commerce and Science College, Autonomous, New Panvel, NCC Department and 3 Maharashtra Battalion, NCC, Mumbai A Group has jointly organized one-day online webinar on experiences from the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War. I would like to welcome our today's chief guest, Lieutenant General Arvinder Singh Lamba sir, PVSM, AVSM, former Vice Chief of Indian Army, Commanding Officer of 3 Maharashtra Battalion, Colonel Tushar Joshi sir, Mr. Vinod Sahasrabuddhe sir, Chairman of Janardhan Bhagat Shikshan Prasarak Sanstha, ex-MP, Honorable Shri Ramshet Thakur sir, MLA, Honorable Shri Prashant Thakur sir, Secretary of Janardhan Bhagat Shikshan Prasarak Sanstha, Dr. S.T. Gadade sir, in charge of Principal of C.K.T. College, Dr. S.K. Patil sir, IQAC Chairman, B.D. Aghav sir, RUSA Coordinator, Dr. Sailesh Vajekar sir, ANO, 3 Maharashtra Battalion, NCC, C.K.Thakur College, Captain Dr. U.T. Bhandare sir, CTO of 8 Maharashtra Battalion, C.K.T. College, Mrs. Nilima Tidar ma'am, HOD, and all the faculties, teachers of C.K.T. College, and all the enthusiastic students and NCC cadets from all over the India. A very heartiest welcome to all of you. First, let me introduce myself. I am CPL Vaishnavi Umesh Baniko, second year NCC cadet from C.K.Thakur College. Before moving forward, I would like to give a small introduction about today's webinar. Today, we all are gathered here to receive the guidance from none other than Lieutenant General A.S. Lamba sir. Today, sir will share his ideas and thoughts and also his experiences from 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War. But before that, I will request everyone to stand up for the national anthem. I request everyone to take their seats. Before moving forward, I request Mr. Vinod Sahasrabuddhe sir to please welcome our guest of honor.
Sir, unmute here.
Okay.
Yes.
I am Mr. Vinod Sahasrabuddhe. I have been privileged to introduce General Lamba. So I will start. I feel really proud and privileged to introduce to you our distinguished chief guest, Lieutenant General A.S. Lamba, PVSM, AVSM, retired Vice Chief of Army Staff. Actually, these are the heroes who should be remembered and honored. But unfortunately, it is not so in our country. Even many of us are not aware of the historic victory in 1971 war with Pakistan and the gallant stories and bravery of our soldiers during that war. Today, the unreal heroes have become the real heroes. This is the golden jubilee year of our victory. This 1971 victory over Pakistan is the greatest and the biggest victory in the history of military conflicts. 92,000 soldiers of Pakistan surrendered, the biggest ever open surrender in the world of history. A new nation was carved out in just 13 days due to bravery and magnificence of our soldiers. And it is our great privilege that we have our chief guest, Lieutenant General Lamba, who was a veteran of 1971 war. There is a long list of General Lamba's achievements and honors, but I have made it short so that he has the maximum time to address us and share his experiences, operational experience. Lieutenant General Arvind Lamba is from Elite Parachute Artillery Regiment, part of India's Airborne Brigade. He has participated in major operations across the country, served important command and staff appointments in various theaters and insurgency areas within the country and also in Sri Lanka. He was company commander at IMA Dehradun. He was major of Mountain Division in counter-insurgency operations in Manipur and later in Sri Lanka. He commanded Grad BM Rocket Regiment on the Western Front. His high command experience. In higher assignments, he headed important strategic planning group of Prospective Planning Directorate. Brigade General Staff of Corps in operational areas, commanded brigade in counter-insurgency operations and frontline division strike corps on the Western Theater. He was head of Army Training Command. As a general officer commanding of Army Training Command in Shimla, he was responsible for evolution of war and training doctrine, technology reviews, and future technology perspective of Indian Army. Then he assumed the charge of Vice Chief of Army Staff. As a Vice Chief of Army Staff, he was responsible for Army level monitoring of external and internal security environment for overall readiness of our Army, military operations, military intelligence, strategic movement, and operational logistics. He retired as a Vice Chief of Army Staff after more than 4 decades of service to the nation. During his hectic career, he has also gained a lot of educational and professional qualifications. His professional qualification include PhD in Management Studies from Pune University, MPhil in Defense and Strategic Studies from Indore University, Masters in International Relations from King's College London, and MSc Defense and Strategic Studies from Chennai University. He has attended a prestigious Royal College of Defense Studies course in UK. This course is only for the selected generals and brigadier levels of officers from all over the world. The course focuses on political, diplomatic, security, social and economic issues at grad strategic level. The core areas of study are international relations, strategic leadership, and conflict prevention. Though he retired, as it is said, the soldier never retires. Post-retirement, he is even more busy. General continues to address officers of the Higher Command Wing at Army War College, Mahu, College of Defence Management, Secunderabad, Defence Service College, Wellington, National Defence College, New Delhi on aspects of national security, security strategy, military diplomacy, and international relations. General Officer has been regular panelist on national and international seminars, participant in high-level track 2 dialogues with US and Pakistan. He is presently heading the prestigious Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies in Delhi, and he is on panels of many other think tanks. With this introduction, now we must be having better idea of how much more we are lucky in getting him to address us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I once again thank Lieutenant General Lamba, sir, for sparing his valuable time and gracing the occasion. It's an honor to have you with us, sir. Turning the attention towards the movement we all are eagerly waiting for, but before, I request everyone to keep a check and make sure that their mics are turned off to avoid unnecessary disturbances. Now, I request Lieutenant General A.S. Lamba, sir, to encourage us with his motivating words. Over to you, sir.
Mr. Shastrabudde, Dr. Uddhav Bhandare, the commanding officer of the battalion, 3 Maharashtra NCC battalion, and all the senior professors, academic staff, and other members. And I think Dr. Chitale might also be here. He's my mentor in the management studies doctorate that I did. And all of you who are looking forward to this talk, to hear about the 1971 war. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I consider it a privilege to share with you all my experiences in this war, and what do we get out of reviewing this every year. Today is the 50th year, and we've been doing this review and celebrating this as a Victory Day of Bangladesh. It's a war that happened 50 years back, but it is refreshed for a very significant purpose during this period, only because it has certain lessons. And I think the greatest advantage is that we get a chance to share our experiences during the war, of the war, about the war, and what do we think for the future. Because if that wasn't to happen, our younger generations like you are sitting today, particularly those in the NCC who aspire to join this career, this profession, in fact, it's beyond a career, it's beyond a profession. We call it a way of life because it's not soldiering, it's simply a way of life which encapsulates from when you join the army till your last day, because you never retire. So I consider, and I'm going to share my thoughts about this with you all, not simply at a level that we normally address, keeping in mind the level of the audience, but I will surpass that and share some high-level lessons that you would all benefit from. Because if you ever get into the politics, as economists, into finance, into business enterprises, all of you will have a role to play, because it's political will, it's strategic leadership, it's a strong economy, and it is the strength of a nation that must be put together to be able to bring comprehensive national power. And for that reason, I appreciate this thought with Mr. Shastrabudde. He led this and he invited me to speak. I am going to touch some fairly high-level issues as well, so that as you grow, you don't have to learn these. These are established facts, and I'll put them across as simply as I can for you to apply, not today only, but as you grow. We have had a number of wars, 1948 in the Kashmir, when the invaders were thrown out. Then we went on to 62, a debacle, 65, a good war, 71, a war of victory, and in between a whole decade and thereafter decades of counterinsurgency warfare. But 1971 war has stood out. And why do we study this? Before I go on to the war, I'm supposed to cover two short aspects. One, what was my motivation to join? And second, how did I join the army? I will quickly touch that rather than talking about the war first and coming back to motivation. I think as far as motivation is concerned, just anyone can get inspired to join this career. In my time, my grandfather, he was a sub-lieutenant in the World War One. He was an officer in the Royal Medical Corps in 1919, but he sadly passed away after 2 decorations during a long service in 1923, and he died because of the conditions of service which were there. My father was 4 years old when my grandfather passed away, and he too wanted to join the army, but because of bad eyesight during his childhood days, he rose up to be an additional controller defense accounts in the CDA. I'm the third generation, really speaking, and I do consider my grandfather and father both as my inspiration to join the services. Well, and how did I join and how could I look at the army? In our time, I'm talking of 67 when I joined the NDA, I was doing my senior Kremlin from Meerut. Meerut had 7 regimental centers. And as a kid in my 6th class, I had seen those regiments getting ready for war on the Northern Front in 1962. This was a hyper-active station where troops were being ready. I had seen mobilization, and we heard a lot about how things were done. During the 65 war, our closest contact was about hearing about the war on the radio, but I think the air attacks that were carried out by the Pakistani Air Force were our nearest contact then with the war. But during my senior Cambridge, there were 3 options we had as careers: the army, the medical, and engineering. There wasn't a 4th career. There were no other options. None of the corporate sector, none of the private sector, none of enterprises, none of startups. Nothing of all this was there. So I think my simple motivation is me, my father, my grandfather. Options, very few. But what I'd like to say here is, why did I join? It is clarity of mind. That service to the nation was awakened some way or the other through the factors that I've told you. I opted for I joined the NDA at 15 and a half years of service. That means I started the process of appearing for the NDA exam when I was 14 and a half and doing my senior Cambridge. So we had a lot of friends who were from army backgrounds, the famous Mall Road of Meerut, Kent. And I was definitely happy to see the kind of life they were living. My own father was working in the centers then, regimental centers as an officer. And so I think put together, finally, how does it differ from the motivation that you seek? I never had seen a war, but we shared wars with you. Experience of our soldiers come to you in various forms. The importance of military leadership as part of a national strategy is something that none of you can miss. And I think finally, it's the ranks, the senior officers, the think tanks, and the international discussions that are held, the victory days that are celebrated, the Republic Day that is celebrated, the way you all would get a great feel that this is a service extraordinaire. It's a service, which I said, is what we call a way of life. And if you choose to join it, you would find that this is something, a spectacular way. It has its risks, it has its ups, it has its downs, and it does give you a flavor that no other profession can give you. I'll leave it at that and go on to begin on the 1971 war. Mr. Seswood, I have a slight problem. Whenever I'm talking, I see anybody who enters the waiting room, his details are coming to me. I can see Bhavik entering the room, whom I'm supposed to admit, it's been happening for the last 15 minutes. So I think somebody at the laptop can remove me from being a co-chair of the program. Probably, maybe then these things do not come. Thank you. I'll leave it at that and begin. So why do we? So 1971 war. What makes it so important is some few points that I've scribbled out, and none of this is from the books only. This is my personal experiences, my hard contact with the environment over life, but beginning with 71 war, which I joined at 3 months service as a second lieutenant in the erstwhile East Pakistan, on the East Pakistan border, before we went in to liberate this nation. This war has its significance, namely, it's a short war. A 13-day conventional war is something that's very small. The war of 65 was a 22-day war. This war created a new republic. What was East Pakistan is today Bangladesh. It changed the map of the region. It altered the strategic dynamics of challenge and cooperation. And if I take you back a bit, East Pakistan is a legacy of the British divide and rule policy. The kind of fragments that they had put on the eastern and western sides of India was something that was always very worrisome. And they were a huge, huge disadvantage. And for those who can quickly connect, as what I wish to say is, if this had not changed, we would have had a very difficult challenge. Because people talk about two fronts war. My reminder to everyone is we actually fought a two-front war in 1971. We had a full-fledged war in the eastern sector, and we had a bigger war on the western sector. We had then the resilience to be ready for other disturbances, but fortunately, and I think good for China, that they stayed out of this war. There were Russia and America as the bigwigs who appeared at one stage of the war. A bit of that you may miss in normal readings, but I will touch that a bit later. This war also had a unique character. It told us for the first time that military rules can cause havoc. While Pakistan, it was going on since independence, but it was Bangladesh that after winning Awami League, winning 69 out of 71 votes, was actually being rubbled out by the military dictatorship. And that is what caused the civil war. So I think what made it unique within this was a war that was a civil war that witnessed how a military dictatorship cannot mow down a civilian population. Something that is going to bring us huge lessons as we go along in modern day history. It also was a war that had a very simple doctrine, a very simple strategy, but it was remarkable of military leadership and political will. A huge amount of small failures, but at the end, it proved that a country or a nation's comprehensive combat and national power can come together to alter the threat to a country. The political situation also has been very, very unique. And it was, give you just in my introduction before I come to the description of a bit more detailed description about how the war went on. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and General S.F.J. Manekshaw were two leaders who made this outcome possible. This also led to a projection of the nation where political will and military power are important and inevitable to make a success out of anything, of any situation. We had 1 million refugees that time. And when we started thinking about how to respond, and India was a growing nation in 71. It had a good army, but it had a long way to go. Its modernization had just begun. Its expansion had just begun, but that was not the perfect state of readiness. We had thought we'd have to go into war as 5 years within 6 years of having fought a war in 1965. So this refugees became a huge burden, but in retrospect, became the most decisive rationale for our military response. So if you configure and put together what I have said, it's the situation that India handled remarkably. And that is the reason that the world has acknowledged the liberation of Bangladesh and the role of Indian Army as something which is extraordinary, which is historic, and which is a lesson for many other countries to follow. We had, at one final point, this was a war that was never anticipated. After 1948 and after 1965, the bias of our defenses was always on the West of our forces. East was, well, always there, but this kind of a mobilization and war had never been planned. So we saw a situation where a lot of troop movements had to be done from the Western sector, the central sector, to the Eastern sector, and prepare for the war that was to come. The strategy and the concept was quite simple, but I will spell out the agencies that contributed monumentally to its success. Having talked about the significance, I think I would touch about the war itself and where did it lead us to. 3rd of December 1971 was the official date of the beginning of this war. But I can take you back to dates in November, which were any time from the 3rd of November onwards in various sectors, that the Indian Army had actually crossed the border. The Mukti Bahini, almost 100,000 raised, Indian officers involved, the research and analysis wing, the RAW, who was then headed by Mr. Cow, and his people became famous as the Cowboys, played a huge role. The mobilization of the Mukti Bahini probably happened in a few months between April, when the first dialogue between the Prime Minister and the military leadership, General Manekshaw, took place, till the time we went into battle in November. The second important thing, while General Manekshaw, I am still getting those, small cutting, some indications that somebody's entering, he wants to join, and I am supposed to admit it. So kindly please correct it, it's a big disturbance. In the period from April, when the first dialogue at the highest level had taken place, General Manekshaw had disagreed with the Prime Minister's proposal to move into Bangladesh in May and June. And the reasons you would be knowing, as it is in June and July when the monsoon set in, this area has heavy rainfall and can be quite an impediment for offensive operations by any country, and in this case, by India. The second, logistics, ammunition, movement of troops, we were not yet ready. And the greatest example that came out in this discussion was General Manekshaw, having presented the real-time situation, got the permission of the Prime Minister, who had virtually made up her mind. And that was the strength of the political will, to allow it to happen at a time when the military considers it most apt. In this period of 5, the logistics were built out. So very important is the factor that I just said. We needed an element that knew the country better than us, that knew the language that we wanted, that was fighting for liberation, that had been quelled by military leadership sitting across in West Pakistan. The terrain was not very well known, and it was imperative that we have local support, and more than local support, that will make our task so much simpler. These 4 months gave the RAW and many other dedicated soldiers and officers of East Pakistan, 10 East Pakistan Army, to actually quit and join hands on the other side to guide the Indian Army. This was a very big effort by India to motivate, and I think the nation that wanted liberation found no reason not to rise to this challenge and ensure that they participate as much as India contributes to make it a truly historic victory and something that their generations would see, future generations would see this particular generation of political leadership as also the part of the military who were locals change the course of history for decades and decades ahead. The war was just about 13 days. It had a huge impact, but the East Pakistan Army, and since I was there, I can narrate a lot of operational battles. I was on the Jessore-Khulna axis, the central axis, but what was happening on all three axes was simultaneous, was extremely well planned, and was headed in the directions where the headquarters of Pakistani formations were there, so that it could culminate at a point where their defeat would be comprehensive, which means that we could actually motivate them, threaten them to lay down arms and ensure that we have the minimum casualties and they have a surrender without fighting. Having been prepared, the Mukti Bahini and the Indian Army started actually functioning in the first week of November. Artillery firing from the Indian Army had begun in November itself. And a lot of Pakistani military was being routed and disrupted, most unexpectedly, because the war had not yet been declared. The Mukti Bahini contributed by attacking rear areas of the army, by disrupting logistics, by disrupting ammunition dumps, and by disrupting their food stores, food logistics, and the supply chains moving along the road. The 3rd of December was a day when the Pakistani Air Force intruded into Indian airspace and carried out the campaign. I'm deliberately omitting the Western theater because my focus is on what and why 1971 war was and where did it lead us to and what do we have in store to tell our younger generations for tomorrow. But two things, a lot happened on the Western theater, and we'll never forget the battle of the Longowala post, which was by Major Chandpuri, and many other battles like this. Then Major A.N. Cardozo, Flight Lieutenant Sekho, and many others, young officers who played their role. So we had the battle went on. It took about 12 days. In fact, when it started on the 3rd, by the 15th or so, we had seen the Pakistan Army in Bangladesh capitulate, and we had seen the air force of the Pakistanis reduce in number dramatically after the first few days in East Pakistan. The strategic distance between East and West Pakistan anyway prohibited any mutual support like this, and they were to help them within themselves. They fought at a disadvantage, but I think it was a strategic victory that India imposed by 3 or 4 elements. Excellent use of the Air Force. The land operations, of course, stand prominently the focal point of military action. The action by the Indian Air Force and the action by the Indian Navy were not only supplementary, but hugely contributory to make this outcome a great success. It was on the 16th that the entire war fighting capability of then East Pakistan and Pakistan Army went down, but strangely not down in numbers and numbers of equipment or quantum of equipment, but it was an example of a perfect psychological warfare in which they had given up. They had given up mentally that they would be unable to fight the war. On the 16th, when the surrender, 16th, 17th, the surrender took place, we were pulled out from Bangladesh and on red hot priority, moved by train. Some of us were moved by air to the Western theater to ensure that should that war on the Western Front last, it would be participated by the troops that had not been engaged on the Eastern Front. As far as the casualties are concerned, a brief mention is important. About 4,000, 3,900 to 4,000 soldiers were killed of the Indian military, and about 10,000 were injured. They still carry lifelong disabilities even today. And I think that made it, still a very, very economic war as far as war casualties are concerned. Two important aspects that are important. Wars, geopolitics is a word that has come up in the last 2 decades or so, where powers have influenced not only smaller powers or middle powers, but enforcement and inducing their strategic outreach for gains that are at the cost of middle and smaller nations, but at their advantage. And that is what we saw, we did not miss. Even as a second lieutenant, I remember it was the 10th of December, and there were no televisions, there were only briefly transistors available to us. And I remember that United States, who was a CENTO partner of Pakistan since independence, since the 1950s, and the reason was that United States needed actual monitoring of not only a lesser of South Asia, but a lot of West Asia and Central Asia. And that's their presence. They had the Central Treaty Organization, they had the SEATO, they had many other organizations in which they wanted their presence to remain after the Second World War, to ensure that they have control, they monitor, and they can influence the evolution of powers in this region. The 7th Fleet, which is today working hand in glove with India's Navy as part of the Indo-Pacific Command, was then used by the President of the United States to come and threaten India into the Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean region to stop the war and prevent East Pakistan from falling. This geopolitics for us as second lieutenants to hear on the radio was completely disheartening, because you felt that a war that is almost won may completely be reversed if this external factor was made its impact. It was then that you found a great friend, Russia, that moved 6 submarines between the 10th and 11th into the Indian Ocean region. And if that's my memory crystal clear even today, I really know how geopolitics can influence the outcome of war. 6 submarines were sent by Russia to have kind of balance. I will not say face off with the 7th Fleet, but show a balance of force in favor of India, ensuring that India's campaign and outcome it intended is accomplished. And I think it would be an appropriate moment to stop here and say, it is the military readiness, it's the political will, it's optimization of your resources, it's maximization of your ability to generate civil unrest to be able to weaken an army. And this was very easy because Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was meeting a fate that was not easily acceptable to the democratic countries of the world. And finally, if India managed to succeed, we have a very powerful geopolitics that India played off in that time, which makes this war for us unique, and this part of the balance of power very significant for our future planning. This was a brief part on the campaign. A few things that came out, I think, would stand out for you, and I will take 5 to 10 minutes to cover them. East Pakistan, like I said, was a British legacy. leaving this country in two parts on our Western and Eastern theater. If you imagine if the map had not been altered, that so far chicken neck, which is between X place of India and Bangladesh, would have been between India and East Pakistan. The most sensitive 22-kilometer gap that is in that joins the mainland to the northeastern states. A second, the influence of India to stabilize its east was most necessary. China was then building up. China has supported insurgencies in India, and we know that China has maximized the weaknesses, the stumbling blocks in the Northeast for India to overcome. The leaders of NSE and IM, you're all aware of. I've served 10 years in the Northeast in every virtual state and had personal experience from younger days to very senior days. Even as vice chief, I was handling the Northeast. So it built, we sensed the kind of insurgency warfare that can disable a country. And why I'm highlighting this is what China is trying again. But while China did it, we were strong and quick enough to accomplish our aim and prevent anything to be done in Bangladesh. All of this, by the way, was happening, and China was doing it in Myanmar because that's when the greater Nagaland demand has been going on since the 50s, and they were an active part of it. Third or fourth, wars will have serious consequences on a nation and is therefore the last resort. The economic impact can be huge, and if a war like 62 happens, an adverse impact, a kind of embarrassment that the nation has to shoulder. And by the way, I can still tell you, it is still a blemish on Indian history because we were taken by surprise. We were almost waylaid into this event, the 1962 war, when we were most unprepared. The reasons I will not recount for you all, but suffice to say that it's important that we need to assess our enemies and adversaries realistically are important. Fourth, just the military and the political leadership have shown that the outcome of a war imposed upon a nation. I mean, India never went to war that time by its own choice. Due to the influx of more than 1 million refugees into India, which India could never have handled. And if that had happened and India had not restored the situation, these displaced refugees could have been without a homeland today. And it was important, it's only countries like India who've been through 1947, we could see the depth of agony for citizens and ensure that we made a situation that could take the refugees back to the country they belong. It's a simple strategy that we had. There were no technology. There were no advanced technologies. It was truly a conventional war. And I think in that, important for you all to know that this was perhaps the last totally military conventional war that we've seen. There were no cybers, there was no electronic warfare, there was no space factor, there were no advanced weapons which could deal beyond horizons or, like hypersonics today. But this was a war which showed the valor of the soldier. I'll start down top. The valor of the soldier, the enormous leadership of officers and JCOs. And I just named two because the war, any war narration without mention of war or of our heroes like Major Kuldeep Singh Chandpuri of 23 Punjab, Ian Cardozo, then company commander of 45 GR, and Flight Lieutenant Sekhon of the Indian Air Force. And there were many who showed this kind of valor. At the operational level, excellent planning it showed by the brigade commanders, by the division commanders, and finally at the top level, it was the army chief. Sorry, I missed out the co-commanders. But at the top level, the guidance, the assurance, the confidence that the military chief, then the chief of the army staff, General Manekshaw, had shown to the country were altogether responsible and a strength that was put together to ensure an outcome that inspires the nation forever in its history. Sixth, foreign policy and alliances. Foreign policy and alliances are an important issue. And by that time, as young officers, I'm sure till the people were almost major generals, one may not have analyzed, except defense attaches who had the fortune of being posted abroad. This was not a subject very easily understood or known to people. And one can realize what impact could it have if there were no alliances for India. If Russia had not risen, the Americans would have certainly stopped India from achieving this victory. And that's why we need to remember, and I brought this point around second time to say, foreign policy and diplomacy are two factors today that prove that nations can never go into war alone. And that is something that I will expand for you all understanding a bit later. There is a big point that I was supposed to cover. There was a major point, and that is, what were the challenges which I've covered in the lesson? What were the challenges then for the military or the armed forces that I saw? And none of what I'm trying to say is from the books. It's my own experience, and I have the advantage of having fought this war at 19 years of age, but studied and refreshed it every time till today, which is nearly 50 years, and reviewed and introspected into this to see how was this success achieved, because it is a great learning lesson for our young officers, for our men, and for the strategists who are going to plan how the next few wars will be fought. Three challenges for the military I can count. First one is the state of modernization. 62 had just proved that we were not ready for a war. 65 proved that we had just barely started acquiring the equipment, but the strength was our officer, man, rank and file, and the tremendous military leadership came in second. And finally, but third is no technology whatsoever, like I said earlier. And finally, the military leadership and the political will were the most dominant factors that emerged as a major lesson for not only us, but for the entire world and armies that were going through wars. We had 1948, we had 1962, we had 1965, and we had 1971. Virtually a decade plus of wars. And I dare say that India's strength is its training, it's a robust man, mentally and physically fit, and it's the experience, the invaluable experience that we have been through these wars that gives us the strength of head and shoulders above any other army in the world. The kind of insurgencies we've handled, I have been in one insurgency in Sri Lanka and 4 tenures in insurgencies within India, spanning over a decade. And I can say that this is a factor that the whole world or a new next war will have to cater for and address in a big way. If you see the situation on our Eastern Front, without naming the countries, you see our major adversary getting into Myanmar. You see a major adversary already sitting in Pakistan and trying to interfere with matters of these smaller countries. So I think the leadership will be a very strong consideration, not only to be able to put our national power together, but what I wish to say in the end is international power must come to bear upon the outcome to ensure desirable outcomes of any future war. India today has a diplomatic endeavor and outreach that we need to be proud of. India's political will is excellent, and I have put the military capability third in the order, but I am proud to say that Indian Army, the Indian Air Force, and in the Indian Navy today are capable of inflicting or responding to any conflict situation brought in upon us by our adversaries, and equally of impelling a new dynamic of taking other adversaries to war and battle should a situation so happen. And I think and you would see that military diplomacy, as it has picked up in the last 3 years, is absolutely extraordinary. The kind of visits in the last 6 months paid by the army chief, the air chief, the naval chief in the countries that we have strategic partnerships or we have a lot to do with militarily and diplomatically are reflections of where we are going. The chief of army staff and in fact, all three chiefs, in particular the army chief, has accompanied the foreign secretary to a new nations. He has preceded the foreign minister to a new nations. He has explored new engagement, for example, the Middle East. And the span of India's engagement is increasing by the day. If I have to leave you all with a thought, having reached this state of accomplishment for the nation, by the nation and by the dominant factors that enable this outcome, I have 2-3 things that I've noted for the younger generations. That's for you all. You all will be leaders today, and we never heard this in our own time. You all will be political leaders, you will be economists, you will be in finance, you will be in the military, and you will be in corporate sector, you will do startups. But remember, for you, very important, each one of you in my perspective or my domain, my thought process will make a huge difference to the nation. It's you all that start building the comprehensive national power now than just the political direction guidance, the military capability, and the civilian resources that put together effort for any war. Each one of you must contribute in whatever way you think. And the second point coming out of this is any country, and particularly one of our adversaries, will attempt, as he's already doing, to squeeze us economically. And we've got to withstand that effort under all circumstances, which I think is not in the hands of economists. It's in the hands of our young generations. It's you, the younger generation today, no matter what field you are, you will be actually witnessing the outcome of your contribution, no matter how small, how big, but make it unique, make it, always new, and make it non-traditional, because a youth can be a big threat to any adversary. And finally, you will not see wars of this kind ever in future. This, I think, is a war, the last conventional war of its kind. You heard of the Yom Kippur War. You heard of Operation Freedom, Enduring Freedom 1, Enduring Freedom 2. You heard of Iraq. You heard of Afghanistan. You've heard of many other wars. Afghanistan, not truly a war, but the state almost, of war in Afghanistan. You are faced we are faced with adversaries on two very sensitive directions, and we need to address it. So finally, the wars will be high-tech. The wars will demand that our nation is self-reliant. The wars will give you no time to import equipment like it happened. You got 6 months to prepare for this war. There will be cyber wars, there will be electronic wars, EW, and there will be space wars. There will be a new dimension that we haven't even thought of, like the artificial intelligence. And if all of this you can list tomorrow, you will have to make all of this happen to the nation's advantage. And this is what I think will be the responsibility of the younger generations to carry forward, to ensure that you have full control of these elements, you have full responsibility to take upon your shoulders, because only then alone, and no matter where you are, if you are in the administration, bureaucracy, in foreign policy as diplomats, in the military as strategists, and in politics, which you all will be, some of you, please remember 1971 was a wonderful example of a victory that we celebrate even now. But to make sure that there is another day that we celebrate, anytime that can be thrust upon us, we need to be prepared, far more stronger. Our capability would have to be much more, and our capacity to build that capability will require to be even more. So I leave it at that. I have spoken for almost 50 minutes, and I think I'll open up the session. If there are any questions, I'll take them on now. Mr. Shasrabuddhe, I stop here. You can continue as you wish me to proceed.
Thank you so much, sir. Today we had an opportunity to listen your thoughts.
Question answer, if there are any question answers.
Thank you so much, sir. Today we had an opportunity to listen your thoughts, and this will surely help us and encourage us in our future events. Moving forward, now we will start our question and answer segment. I would like to inform our chief guest that we circulated a Google form among the students to know their doubts and figure out some of the most common questions. So, sir, may I have your permission to ask them?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So, also I request you to please answer in both languages, like in English also and in Hindi also.
Okay, right.
Thank you, sir. So my first question is, युद्ध में सभी विंग्स कैसे एक साथ कैसे आए और उन्होंने एक साथ समन्वय कैसे किया?
I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat the question once again.
युद्ध में सभी विंग्स एक साथ कैसे आए और उन्होंने एक साथ समन्वय कैसे किया?
Okay. तो आपका मतलब है कि युद्ध में सभी विंग्स मतलब आर्मी, एयरफोर्स, नेवी?
यस सर।
ओके, मैंने कोशिश की थी अपने टॉक में बताने की कि किस तरह से आर्मी ने क्या किया, नेवी ने क्या किया, एयरफोर्स ने क्या किया और किस तरह से युद्ध आए। आज के बनिस्बत पहले जो 1971 में था, लड़ाई हमेशा आर्मी की अलग, नेवी की अलग और एयरफोर्स की अलग थी। मैंने कुछ लैंडमार्क्स एंड टाइमलाइंस आपको बताए थे कि जब कि ईस्टर्न कमांड आर्मी का अपनी ऑपरेशंस बांग्लादेश की लिबरेशन के लिए कर रहा था, तो एयरफोर्स का एक बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण रोल था कि जो बांग्लादेश में एयरफोर्स है पाकिस्तान की, उसको अब जल्द से जल्द खत्म किया जाए, न्यूट्रलाइज किया जाए। नेवी जबकि इंडियन बे ऑफ बंगाल और बे ऑफ बंगाल में, अरेबियन सी में पूरी हमारी जो नेवी है उन्होंने फुल कंट्रोल किया था, ताकि ना केवल पाकिस्तान के सबमरीन या शिप्स इस एरिया में हमें नुकसान दे सकें, लेकिन हमारी नेवल फोर्स इन एरियाज पाकिस्तान तक पहुंचकर दुश्मन के ऊपर अग्रेशन कर सके। आप लोगों ने सब कराची के बारे में सुना है, आप लोगों ने गाजी के बारे में सुना है, और आप लोगों ने नेवी के बहुत सारे एक्शंस अलग से सुने हैं। तो मैं इतना ही कहूंगा कि तीनों सेंट्रली एक वॉर स्ट्रेटजी बनके, जिसमें तीनों के चीफ शामिल होके अपनी अपनी अलग स्ट्रेटजी, अपनी अपनी कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ ऑपरेशंस बनाकर उन्होंने इस ऑपरेशन को दिशा दी और इसको कंप्लीट संपन्न होने में कंट्रीब्यूट किया। ये भी जानना जरूरी है आपको कि आज की लड़ाई इस तरह नहीं होगी। इंटीग्रेटेड कमांड्स और थिएटर कमांड्स कुछ ऐसे नए कॉन्सेप्ट है जहां पर पूरी मिलिट्री, नेवी और एयरफोर्स एक ही कमांडर के नीचे होंगी, एक ही हेड, एक ही ऑफिस के नीचे हों, जिसमें कि प्लानिंग, एक्सिक्यूशन, कॉन्सेप्ट, इम्प्लीमेंटेशन पहले से ज्यादा कहीं आसान और इफेक्टिव होगा।
So my next question is, what is difference between your personal and army life?
My personal and army life, I think a very good question.
Sir, I would request you to please answer in Hindi.
Okay, right. Very interesting question कि आपकी पर्सनल लाइफ और ऑफिशियल लाइफ में क्या अंतर है। पहले तो बहुत मुश्किल है अपनी पर्सनल लाइफ को ऑफिशियल लाइफ से अलग करना। आर्मी एक ऐसी, अगर आर्मी की जरूरत है 24/7, और अगर आप देश के हालात आज देखें किस तरह हमारा ईस्ट में जो हालत है, म्यांमार में जो हालत है, चाइना बॉर्डर पर, नेपाल, भूटान, पाकिस्तान, और जो चाइना की नेवी साउथ चाइना सीज में हो रहा है, जो इंडियन ओशन रीजन में हो रहा है, तो अगर आप ये हालात देखें तो इंडियन मिलिट्री यानी कि आर्मी, नेवी, एयरफोर्स तीनों को ही 24/7 रेडी रहना पड़ेगा। अगर आपको 24/7 रेडी रहना होगा, इसका मतलब आपकी पर्सनल लाइफ 24/7 पहले रेडी रहेगी वॉर्स के लिए, ऑपरेशन के लिए, और अगर वॉर नहीं होता तो अपने लिए इसको अपने ढंग से जिया जा सकता है। तो मैंने आपको एक लड़ाई का बयान दिया 1971 वॉर में समझाते हुए, क्योंकि जब आप एक लड़ाई में चले जाते हैं तो कई बरस ये कैंपेन, ये डिप्लॉयमेंट, ये फॉरवर्ड डिप्लॉयमेंट रहती है, जिसका मतलब आप कई साल, 2 या 3 साल भी यहां से अपने ट्रूप्स को वापस नहीं खींच सकते। जब आपकी पर्सनल लाइफ है, ये एक एक्सट्रीमली सिंपल, बिल्कुल सिंपल, लेकिन एक बहुत ही हाई डिग्निटी की लाइफ है। हमारे जो यंग ऑफिसर्स, हमारी ट्रेनिंग के बाद जो यंग ऑफिसर्स, जेसीओज और जवान हैं, हम लोगों की लाइफ बहुत सिंपल है। और जब हमारा सेकंड स्टेज आता है मैरिड लाइफ का, वो वहां पर हमारी शुरू होती है पर्सनल लाइफ। पहले 6 से 10 साल कोई पर्सनल लाइफ नहीं है, सभी एक रेजिमेंटल लाइफ है और एक लाइफ है जो प्रोफेशनल लाइफ है। उसके बाद जब एक फैमिली आपके साथ लग जाती है तो हमारी लाइफ प्रायोरिटी ड्यूटी, मिलिट्री ड्यूटी, साथ ही साथ मिलिट्री लाइफ, साथ ही साथ पर्सनल लाइफ, और पर्सनल लाइफ में आपकी वाइफ, आपके चिल्ड्रन, इनकी देखभाल के लिए जो इंडियन आर्मी का सिस्टम बनाया हुआ है, इंडियन एनवायरनमेंट है, बहुत ही हाई ग्रेड है। हमारी जो कैंटोनमेंट्स की लाइफ है, इनकी पूरी प्रोटेक्शन है उसमें, इनके स्कूल्स हैं कैंटोनमेंट्स में, आर्मी के वाइफ्स और उनके बच्चे इन कैंटोनमेंट्स में, उनकी सेपरेटेड फैमिली अकोमोडेशन है, जहां वो पूरे सिक्योरिटी के साथ अपनी लाइफ लीड कर सकते हैं, एजुकेशन पा सकते हैं और आगे बढ़ सकते हैं। जब हमारे वार्ड्स या बच्चे बड़े होते हैं तो उनके लिए आर्मी ने बहुत अच्छे आर्मी चिल्ड्रन के लिए इंस्टीट्यूट्स बनाए हैं, आर्मी मेडिकल, आर्मी टेक्नोलॉजी इंस्टीट्यूट्स। आप कुछ ऐसी यूनिवर्सिटीज हैं जो आर्मी के लिए प्रायोरिटी रखती हैं, कुछ ऐसे एरियाज हैं जहां पर आर्मी को प्रायोरिटी और वैकेंसीज दी जाती हैं। तो आई थिंक हमारी लाइफ पर्सनल और आर्मी में ज्यादा अंतर नहीं है, लेकिन जो पर्सनल लाइफ है, जो फैमिली के साथ बहुत ही डिग्निफाइड, सिंपल और हाई ग्रेड की लाइफ है, जहां पर आपको एक अच्छी एजुकेशन, एक सेफ एनवायरनमेंट, एक सेफ एनवायरनमेंट मिलती है, जिसमें आप अपने बच्चों को बड़ा कर सकते हैं, सिखा सकते हैं। एक एक स्टूडेंट जो एक नेशन को कंट्रीब्यूट करे, उस तरह की उसको बुनियाद उसमें उसको हेल्प कर सकते हैं, ताकि वो एक बड़ा होके या आर्मी ज्वाइन करे या कोई भी कैरियर ज्वाइन करे, वो एक सक्सेसफुल आदमी बनेगा। हम लोग बड़े फख्र से कहते हैं कि आर्मी के बच्चे जो है, जो हमारे चिल्ड्रन हैं, हमारे वार्ड्स हैं, चाहे वो ऑफिसर्स के, चाहे जेसीओस के, चाहे जवानों के, इन्होंने जिंदगी में बहुत कामयाबी पाई है। कोई हद नहीं जो इन्होंने पार नहीं की, और सब लोग जो वापस आर्मी में आए हैं, उनके लिए एक ये बहुत ही अच्छा तजुर्बा है कि इस लाइफ को उन्होंने अपनाया है। 4-4 जनरेशन एक फैमिली की इसी लाइफ में चलती जा रही है, और हो सकता है 5वीं और 6ठी जनरेशन भी उनकी इस वे ऑफ लाइफ को अडॉप्ट करे। तो मैं यहाँ पर रुकूंगा कि दोनों लाइफ हैं एक सोल्जर के लिए, बट उनकी वाइफ और उनके सोल्जर्स, उनकी चिल्ड्रन के लिए एक बहुत बड़ा अनुभव है ये, किस तरह से अपने ब्रेड विनिंग मेंबर को वॉर पर जाने के लिए उत्साहित किया जाए, सपोर्ट किया जाए, जानते हुए भी कि ये एक आउटकम में ऐसे जा सकते हैं जहां से ये कभी वापस ना आए। बहुत एग्जाम्पल्स हैं जहां पर वाइफ्स ने अपने हस्बैंड्स को, मदर्स ने अपने बच्चों को, और इसी तरह पूरी फैमिलीज ने अपने बच्चों को आगे बढ़ाकर, चाहे कितनी ही कैजुअलिटीज हो, अपने फैमिलीज में इस प्रोफेशन के साथ जुड़े रहे। थैंक यू, इससे ज्यादा मैं कह नहीं सकता।
Thank you, sir. So my next question is, any incident which you will always remember from the war?
Incident that I remember for the war, इस वॉर में हमने वो सीखा जो एक अच्छी आर्मी करती है, and what a good army must not do. It was in Bangladesh. We had heard about mass massacres and mass killing of innocent people. तो एक ट्रेडिशनल आर्मी है जो अपने दुश्मन पर फोकस करके, उनको हराकर, सरेंडर कराकर, अपने विल उनके ऊपर इम्पोज करके अपना मिशन अकॉम्प्लिश करती है। हमने जो सीखा उतना ही जरूरी था कि जो एक अच्छी आर्मी को नहीं करना चाहिए, जो हमने बांग्लादेश में अपना पाकिस्तान आर्मी को करते हुए देखा। वहां पर बहुत सारे लोग मिले जिनके साथ बहुत बेइज्जत बातें हुई थी, मास किलिंग्स, कम्युनल किलिंग्स, मास मर्डर्स ऑफ बच्चों के, औरतों के, और कईयों के जो इस उम्र के थे जिनका कोई देश में कंट्रीब्यूशन नहीं हो सकता था इन द टाइम ऑफ वॉर। तो मेरा एक इमोशनल इंसिडेंट था, जबकि हमने देखा कि यही एक आर्मी इस तरह का करेगी तो उसका आउटकम वही होगा जो पाकिस्तान आर्मी का हुआ। उसी को हमने एक लाइफ का ऐसा लेसन बना लिया कि कहीं भी हम जाएं, ये इंसाफ किसी इनोसेंट चाइल्ड, मदर या ओल्ड मैन या सिविलियन पर ये कभी नहीं होना चाहिए। वो दिमाग से जो सीन हमने देखे किलिंग्स के, वो शायद एक इतना स्ट्रॉन्ग सेंटिमेंट है कि इसको ना करेंगे ना होने देंगे। तो ये एक मोमेंट है जो हम कभी भूल नहीं सकते।
Thank you, sir. Now I will request Captain Dr. U.T. Bhandare, sir, to ask question. Sir, please unmute yourself.
जय हिंद सर।
जय हिंद।
सर मैं डॉक्टर यूटी भंडारे, एएनओ, चंगुकाना ठाकुर कला वाणिज्य विज्ञान महाविद्यालय, नवीन पनवेल। सर आपने अपने अनुभव के माध्यम से विद्यार्थियों को बहुत कुछ कम समय में देने का प्रयास किया और बच्चे अवश्य इससे प्रभावित होंगे। लेकिन मेरा प्रश्न थोड़ा अलग प्रकार से मेरे मन में आ रहा था, पूछूं या न पूछूं ये भी सामंजस्य में था, लेकिन अगर ये सेशन समाप्त हो गया तो बाद में मैं किसी और को पूछ नहीं सकता और वो जवाब भी ठीक तरह से नहीं दे पाएगा, इसलिए मैंने पूछना मुनासिब समझा। ये मेरा प्रश्न ये है कि बांग्लादेश और भारत का जब पाकिस्तान से बांग्लादेश जब अलग हुआ उस समय भारत का योगदान, उस समय में रक्षा मंत्री और प्राइम मिनिस्टर इनका आर्मी नेवी एयरफोर्स के लिए जो योगदान, सजेशन, मार्गदर्शन वो किस प्रकार का रहा और इसके आधार पर कुछ आगे की स्ट्रेटेजी बनती रही, बिगड़ती रही, ये एक बात। अगर आज की परिस्थितियां ले लेते हैं आर्मी नेवी एयरफोर्स की और प्राइम मिनिस्टर और रक्षा मंत्री इनकी, तो इनका इंटरफेयर इस प्रकार से कुछ आज की स्थिति क्या हो सकती है, कैसे है और उस समय की परिस्थिति कैसे थे, थोड़ा बहुत अनुभव उस समय का और थोड़ा बहुत अनुभव इस समय का आप मुझे बताने का प्रयास कीजिए।
ऐसी जजमेंट हम लोगों के दिमाग में तब आती है जब हमें अपने सिस्टम्स जो हमारे को जो हमने सोचा, उम्मीद की अपनी मिलिट्री से, अपने पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप से, जैसे आपने बोला प्राइम मिनिस्टर, डिफेंस मिनिस्टर या आर्मी नेवी एयरफोर्स के चीफ्स, जो हमारी सोच है मिलिट्री की, उनका मिशन एक ही है, किसी भी जगह जाकर दिए हुए मिशन को अकॉम्प्लिश करना, कम हेल और हाई वाटर। और हमारे लिए उस मिशन को कंप्लीट करने के लिए कोई भी ऐसा गाइडेंस नहीं चाहिए किसी से भी। एक बार हमें मिलिट्री मिशन मिल गया तो हमें कोई गाइडेंस नहीं चाहिए।
अच्छा।
अगर आप उस समय की बात करें 1971, जो उस टाइम प्राइम एक्टर्स थे, प्राइम मिनिस्टर, डिफेंस मिनिस्टर और द मिलिट्री चीफ्स, ये एक इतना स्ट्रॉन्ग बॉन्डिंग है और उसको मैंने 2 बारी जाहिर किया, एक लेसन्स पे और एक फ्यूचर पर इसका असर क्या होगा। जो लीडरशिप देती है पॉलिटिकल विल, एक आर्मी तब तक कामयाब हो सकती है जब तक उसको क्लियर गाइडेंस और दिशा ना दिखे। 1971 में ये दिशा 2 लोगों के बीच थी, दिखी और उसको अकॉम्प्लिश किया। That was the best understanding. Sorry, there was a phone call. आज के हालात में ये सिचुएशन कुछ कॉम्प्लेक्स लगती है, खासकर उनको जो इस डिपार्टमेंट से जुड़े नहीं हैं। आप लोग देखते हैं कि किस तरह से तीनों चीफ्स अपने वही मुद्दे को लेकर एक इंटीग्रेटेड कमांड या सुना था थिएटर कमांड, कुछ भी इस तरह से शामिल करके तीनों की थिंकिंग सिंगुलर हो जाएगी। तो एक बड़ी चेंज जो आई है, जो तीनों की स्ट्रेटजी होगी वो जॉइंट वॉर फाइटिंग स्ट्रेटजी, मतलब आर्मी नेवी एयरफोर्स इकट्ठे प्लान के बैठकर प्लान बनाएंगे और उसको हासिल करेंगे। उसके लिए लीडरशिप कॉमन होगी। अगर एक लेफ्टिनेंट जनरल कल एक एरिया के रिस्पॉन्सिबल है, तीनों फोर्सेस, एयरफोर्स, नेवी और उनकी अपनी आर्मी उन्हीं के नीचे होगी। इसी तरह अगर अंडमान निकोबार में, जिसको आज से ANC बोला जाता है, अंडमान निकोबार कमांड, ये हमेशा नेवल ऑफिसर के पास, अगर नेवल ऑफिसर के पास हुआ तो चाहे नेवी का कंटेंट ज्यादा है या कम है, इससे फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा। इसी तरह जब ये एयरफोर्स के नीचे आएगा तो पूरी रिसोर्सेज एयरफोर्स के नीचे है, और जब आर्मी का आएगा तो पूरी आर्मी की रिसोर्सेज। तो मेरा मकसद है, मैं ड्रॉ कर रहा हूँ एक डिफरेंस कि एक स्ट्रेटेजिक लोकेशन है अंडमान निकोबार कमांड। ये हमारी मिलिट्री ने दर्शा दिया कि कमांडर कोई भी हो, जब एक नेशनल स्ट्रेटजी बन गई, नेवी, आर्मी, एयरफोर्स तीनों इतने माहिर हैं उस स्ट्रेटजी को न केवल बनाने में या अपग्रेड करने में, लेकिन उसको एग्जीक्यूट, प्रोसिक्यूट करने में और अपनी मिशन को अकॉम्प्लिश करेंगे। तो ये एक बहुत बड़ा अंतर है उस समय से, और ये एक प्रोग्रेसिव अंतर है। उस टाइम बहुत अच्छा था उन दिनों में, लेकिन आज तीनों की कैपेबिलिटी बनाकर जॉइंट थिएटर कमांड, जॉइंट एंड थिएटर कमांड्स में एक बहुत बड़ा इंटीग्रेशन नेचुरल हो गया। अगला है जो प्राइम मिनिस्टर या डिफेंस मिनिस्टर की, जो आपने लीडरशिप और पॉलिटिकल देखी है, शायद ये कई बरसों के बाद, कई डेकेड्स के बाद इस तरह की क्लैरिटी, इस तरह की पॉलिटिकल विल आपके सामने आई है। और मैं मानता हूं इस तरीके का इंटीग्रेशन अपनी फौज के साथ, जहां हमारे प्राइम मिनिस्टर और डिफेंस मिनिस्टर नॉर्दर्न बॉर्डर्स, ईस्टर्न पूरी फौज के साथ बहुत अक्सर मिलते रहते हैं, उनके कमांडर्स को बहुत अक्सर मिलते हैं। तो ये एक दर्शाता है सारी दुनिया को कि हम लोग बहुत ही कामयाब आर्मी फोर्स हैं, और उतनी ही और एक कामयाब मिलिट्री पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप है, और दोनों ही इतने कामयाब हैं कि किसी भी मिशन को हासिल करेंगे। गलवान के बाद जो हुआ और जो जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट निकली आर्मी से, फॉरेन मिनिस्टर से या प्राइम मिनिस्टर से, तीनों ही एक ही दिशा में हैं कि ये अभी पुराने वॉर की तरह नहीं होगा। रही छोटी सी बात जिसकी वजह से शायद ये आपको क्वेश्चन मन में आया, सोशल मीडिया एक ऐसा डिसरप्टिव चैनल है जो हमेशा एक कंट्री की स्ट्रॉन्ग कैपेबिलिटी को वीकन करने की कोशिश करेगा। सोशल मीडिया एक ऐसा थ्रेट है कंट्री के लिए, जो आपके मैसेजेस जो आप व्हाट्सएप देखते हैं वो एक हिस्सा है, छोटा सा ट्रिकल ऑफ सोशल मीडिया, लेकिन उस पर जो मैसेज जब नेशनल स्ट्रेंथ पर आते हैं, या डिफरेंसेस पर आते हैं, या कम्युनलिज्म पर आते हैं, या किसी भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को लेट डाउन करने के लिए आते हैं, ये आप सोचिए, ये शायद आपके अपने देशवासी इसमें शामिल नहीं होंगे जरूर, वो हमेशा थोड़े से स्मॉल परसेंटेज इज ऑलवेज देयर, बट ये एक जरिया है आपके एडवर्सरीज का पोज करके रिमोटली एक ऐसी दिशा दिखाएं आपके सिटीजन्स को, ताकि कम्युनलिज्म आए, फ्रिक्शन आए पॉलिटिक्स, फॉरेन पॉलिसी, मिलिट्री के बीच में, और हमारी उतनी कामयाब जिससे वो डरते हैं उस कामयाबी को रोकना चाहें। लेकिन ये आपको यकीन मानना पड़ेगा, मेरा एक्सपीरियंस है, इस सोशल मीडिया से कुछ भी हो, जो हमारी कैपेबिलिटी है, जो मिलिट्री की ताकत है, और जो मिलिट्री का पर्सपेक्टिव है, वो एक रत्ती भी इससे चेंज नहीं होगा। बहुत लोग हैं जिनका आर्मी को, कई लोग हैं जो आर्मी को इतनी बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंस देने से ही डरते हैं। उनको नहीं अच्छा लगता कि आर्मी की काबिलियत और अचीवमेंट को ग्लोरीफाई किया जाए, ऐसे भी बहुत लोग हैं। तो लेकिन वो भी शामिल है, लेकिन जब तक पॉलिटिकल विल और मिलिट्री कमांडर इसमें अपनी काबिलियत पर मजबूत हैं, तो कोई भी सोशल मीडिया उनको नहीं डिटर कर सकता। और मेरा मानना ये भी है कि ये डिफरेंसेस चलते रहेंगे। अगर आप पढ़ें कि अमेरिकन आर्मी में, ब्रिटिश आर्मी में किस तरह का टर्बुलेंस रहता है, वो इंडियन आर्मी में नहीं है, फिर भी दर्शाया जाता है ताकि आपको कमजोर किया जा सके। सो द लीडरशिप इज एज गुड एज इट वाज, द इंटीग्रेशन इज एज गुड एज इट वाज, and the next war will have a better outcome than the last war.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. My last question is, what lesson you would like to give to the young generation of the country?
मैंने 2-3 छोटे लेसन आपको बताए थे जब मैं इसको टॉक को खत्म कर रहा था। फिर भी 2 चीज आपको याद रखनी है। पहला, इंडिया एक डेवलपिंग नेशन है, चाइना एक डेवलप्ड नेशन है। दोनों की शुरुआत 1947 में इंडिया की और 1949 में चाइना की शुरुआत हुई। चाइना कैसे एक सुपर पावर बन गया आज, इंडिया क्यों नहीं एक सुपर पावर बन पाया आज? क्योंकि हमारी जो इंडस्ट्री है, हमारी जो डेमोक्रेसी है, इसमें कुछ खामियां हैं जहां पर नेशनल इंटरेस्ट को अपहोल्ड नहीं किया जा सकता। अमेरिका की भी डेमोक्रेसी है, लेकिन वहां के लोग, वो डेवलप्ड कंट्री है, और जैसे वो अपने आप को सुपर पावर प्रूव करता है, सारे देशवासी उसके साथ मिले हुए हैं। वो हालात हमारी कंट्री में एज अ डेवलपिंग नेशन चैलेंजेस बहुत ज्यादा हैं। दूसरा, सेल्फ रिलायंस पिछले 70 साल में बहुत कम अचीव हुई है, और जब तक सेल्फ रिलायंस नहीं होगी तब तक हम एक काबिल देश नहीं बन सकते, एक सेल्फ रिलायंट नेशन नहीं बन सकते। जो पिछले 5-7 साल में प्रेजेंट गवर्नमेंट ने, प्रेजेंट पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप ने हासिल किया है, मुझे लगता है ये बहुत अच्छी कामयाबी है जो हमारी कैपेबिलिटी को और मजबूत करेगा। तो आपके लिए, यंग जनरेशन के लिए, you will be a part of next war, unlike the last war. जब हम लोग लड़ रहे थे, आप लोग कॉलेज में जा रहे थे, यूनिवर्सिटी वाले यूनिवर्सिटी में जा रहे थे, जो थोड़ा बहुत इंजीनियरिंग कर रहे थे वो इंजीनियरिंग कर रहे थे। फर्क इतना होगा, अगले लड़ाई के लिए, चाहे आप कॉलेज में हैं, चाहे आप यूनिवर्सिटी में हैं, चाहे आप टेक्नोलॉजी पकड़ रहे हैं, आपको देश के लिए कुछ ऐसा करना होगा कि आपका देश नेक्स्ट वॉर के लिए रेडी हो। और अगर आप सब लोग, जैसे मैंने बताया, चाहे पॉलिटिशियन बने, चाहे बिजनेस एंटरप्रेन्योर, चाहे मिलिट्री कमांडर्स या जवान, या हाई टेक्नोलॉजी या आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस में भाग ले, आप या एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन जैसे IAS, आप सबको अपने मन में एक दृढ़ता से फैक्टर प्लान करना होगा, और वो है हाउ कैन आई सर्व माय नेशन। जब तक ये जागरूकता हर एक आप में से हर एक में नहीं आएगी, हमारा नेशन स्ट्रांग नहीं हो पाएगा जितना हमें जरूरत है। हम लोग चाइना या US से कंपेयर नहीं कर सकते, लेकिन हम बोलते हैं चाहे हमारी आर्मी चाइना से कहीं छोटी है, लेकिन हमारी जो आर्मी का कैपेबिलिटी है, मेंटल रोबस्टनेस है, जो वॉर एक्सपीरियंस है, जो सेल्फलेसनेस है हमारी लाइफ में, उससे हम किसी भी दुश्मन को हरा सकते हैं। यही डिफरेंस आपने बनाना है। विद वॉट एवर वी हैव, इट इज द स्ट्रेंथ ऑफ द यूथ will fill the gaps and give a strength to the nation to win the next war.
Thank you so much, sir. I hope everyone's doubts and questions are cleared now. Now I request Junior Under Officer Aditya Uttekar to please present the vote of thanks.
Good evening, sir. Honorable dignitaries, distinguished guests, respected Lieutenant General Arvind Singh Lamba, sir, and NCC cadets and viewers, on the behalf of 3 Maharashtra Battalion, Mumbai A Group, I, Junior Under Officer Aditya Uttekar, would like to immense pleasure propose of vote of thanks to Lieutenant General A.S. Lamba, sir. I want to express my sincere gratitude to the sir who has spared his precious time from his busy schedule to grace this occasion and enlighten us with the encouraging words and had an impactful interactive session today. Also, I would like to extend my vote of thanks to Mr. Vinod Sahasrabudhe sir for providing us with the opportunity to get in touch with Lieutenant General A.S. Lamba sir. My deep sense of thanks and appreciation goes to all the cadets and all the viewers who have joined to this webinar. via YouTube and also attend the webinar with a great enthusiasm and made it a great success. Last but not the least, I would like to thank the cadets of C.K.Thakur Unit Panvel and the Associate NCC Officer, Captain Dr. U.T. Bandare sir, for letting us host this webinar and also providing us with all the technical support. And in the end, I would like to thank all the very much to everyone. Also, a great vote of thanks to the college management who has provided the college facilities with the resource center to make this webinar successful. And I wish everyone a wonderful, great day ahead. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Mr. Shastrabuddhe. Can I leave now? Yeah, okay. Please go ahead.
So, NCC song is going to start now. So I request everyone to please stand for the NCC song. I hereby declare the meeting is ended now. Thank you so much to everyone for attending and making the seminar successful.